The oak doors of the Torrino family's private dining room creak open, and 20-year-old LUCIA MARCELLI steps inside with trembling hands pressed against her stomach. The room falls deadly silent. 5 of the most dangerous men in Chicago turn their cold eyes toward her. Men who have built their empire on fear, respect, and the unbreakable law that family comes first. Don Salvatore Torrino sits at the head of the mahogany table, his weathered fingers drumming against the polished surface. At 65, he has survived 3 wars, countless betrayals, and rivals who thought they could take his throne. His dark eyes have seen enough blood to fill Lake Michigan. Lucia's voice barely rises above a whisper, but her words hit the room like a gunshot. "I'm pregnant with the Don's child." The silence stretches like a blade against throat. Everyone expects her execution, but what will the Don's response reveal about the future of his empire? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The air in the room grows thick as molasses. Vincent Rossetti's hand moves instinctively toward the gun beneath his jacket, while the other council members lean back in their leather chairs, waiting for the Don's inevitable order. They've all seen this before, disrespect met with swift, brutal justice, but Don Salvatore Torrino does something that shocks every man in that room. He stands slowly, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table, and his dark eyes soften as they focus on Lucia. The gold signet ring on his finger, bearing the Torrino family crest that has commanded respect for 4 generations, catches the lamplight as he reaches into his vest pocket. His fingers close around Margaret's wooden rosary, the prayer beads his late wife clutched during every difficult decision of their 43-year marriage. The smooth wood, worn by decades of faithful hands, seems to steady him as he processes what Lucia has just revealed. "Lucia," he says, his voice gentle in a way that makes Vincent's jaw drop. "Come here, child." She takes hesitant steps forward, her legs barely supporting her weight. Every instinct screams that she's walking toward her death, but something in Salvatore's eyes, a warmth she's only glimpsed during their secret late-night conversations, gives her courage to continue. When she reaches him, Salvatore does the unthinkable. He wraps his arms around her trembling shoulders and pulls her against his chest in a protective embrace. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood and bergamot mingles with the fierce sweat on her skin. "Your family now," he whispers into her ear, loud enough for the council to hear. And family protects family. Vincent shoots to his feet, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Don Torrino, with all due respect, this girl is nobody, a server. She has no place in this family." Salvatore's eyes turn to ice as he faces his longtime counsel. "Are you questioning my judgment, Vincent?" The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Everyone knows that questioning the Don's judgment is a fast track to a shallow grave in the woods outside the city. "I'm thinking about the family's reputation," Vincent says carefully, though his voice carries an edge of defiance. "Your nephew Marco has been groomed his entire life to take over operations. Now you're telling us that some waitress carrying your bastard will inherit everything we've built." Lucia flinches at the word bastard, but Salvatore's grip on her shoulders tightens protectively. His voice, when he speaks, carries the quiet menace that has made grown men weep. "This child will be my legitimate heir. Lucia will be under my protection, and anyone who threatens her threatens me directly." He pauses, letting the implications sink in. "Is that understood?" The other council members, Tony Benedetto, Frank Caruso, and old Jimmy DeMarco, exchange nervous glances. They've known Salvatore for decades, seen him make calculated decisions that always serve the family's interests. This emotional response is unprecedented. "What about Marco?" Tony asks quietly. "He's been your right hand for 15 years. This decision will destroy him." Salvatore's jaw tightens. Marco Torrino, his brother's son, has indeed been groomed since childhood to inherit the family business. The young man has proven himself capable, ruthless when necessary, and completely loyal to the Torrino name. But loyalty to a name isn't the same as loyalty to the man who bears it. "Marco will adapt," Salvatore says finally, "or he'll find himself working for someone else." Lucia looks up at this man who has just turned his world upside down to protect her. 6 months ago, she was nobody, an orphaned girl working 3 jobs to keep a roof over her head. She'd taken the serving position at Torrino family gatherings because the pay was exceptional and the work, while intimidating, was straightforward. But those late-night conversations in Salvatore's study had changed everything. After the other staff went home, she would stay to help clean up, and somehow they'd begun talking, really talking, about books, about life, about the loneliness that wealth and power couldn't cure. He'd told her about Margaret, his wife of 4 decades, who died 2 years earlier from cancer, how the house felt empty without her laugh echoing through the halls, how he'd built an empire but felt like he was ruling over ashes. She'd shared her own story, losing her parents in a car accident at 16, aging out of the foster system with nothing but determination and a stubborn refusal to give up. They'd found something in each other that neither had expected: understanding. Vincent's voice cuts through her memories. This decision puts us all at risk. The other families will see weakness. They'll think sentiment has made you soft. Let them think what they want, Salvatore replies, his arm still around Lucia. When this child is born, they'll understand that the Torrino bloodline continues, that our strength comes not just from fear, but from family. The room falls silent again, but this time the silence carries a different weight. These men have followed Salvatore's leadership for decades because his decisions, however harsh, have always proven right in the end. They're struggling to reconcile this emotional choice with the cold calculation they've come to expect. Lucia feels the baby flutter in her womb, barely noticeable at this early stage, but real enough to remind her that this isn't just about her anymore. She's carrying the future of one of Chicago's most powerful crime families, whether she asked for that responsibility or not. Marco Torrino's fist slams into the mahogany bar of his private club, sending a crystal tumbler crashing to the floor. The amber whiskey spreads across polished wood like spilled blood, and the sound echoes through the empty room like a gunshot. 28 years, he growls to Vincent Rossetti, who sits across from him in the dimly lit corner booth. 28 years I've given everything to this family. Every decision, every sacrifice, every drop of blood I've spilled has been for the Torrino name. Vincent nurses his own drink, his weathered face grim in the lamplight. Your uncle has lost his mind. That girl has bewitched him somehow. It's not witchcraft, Marco spits. It's old age and loneliness making him weak. He sees a pretty face and forgets 40 years of tradition. The Torrino family tree document lies spread between them on the table, an ornate genealogy chart that Marco's grandmother had commissioned decades ago. 4 generations of careful bloodline management, strategic marriages, and legitimate heirs stretch across the parchment in elegant calligraphy. Now an outsider's bastard threatens to make it all meaningless. We need to act carefully, Vincent warns. Your uncle still commands absolute loyalty from most of the soldiers. One wrong move and we're both dead. Meanwhile, across the city, Lucia follows Elena Torrino through the marble hallways of the family estate. At 52, Elena carries herself with the quiet dignity of someone who has learned to wield power without raising her voice. As Salvatore's younger sister, she's navigated the treacherous waters of family politics her entire life. The East Wing will be your rooms, Elena explains, opening the door to a suite that's larger than any apartment Lucia has ever lived in. Salvatore has assigned round-the-clock protection. Antonio Ricci will coordinate your security personally. Antonio steps forward, a man in his early 40s with calculating eyes and the easy movement of someone comfortable with violence. Ma'am, I need to brief you on some basic security protocols. Lucia nods, though the reality of needing bodyguards still feels surreal. I appreciate your protection, but I don't want to be a prisoner in here. You won't be, Elena assures her, but you need to understand that your life changed the moment you walked into that dining room. You're carrying the future of this family, and there are people who would kill to prevent that future from arriving. As if summoned by her words, the sound of breaking glass echoes from somewhere in the house. Antonio's hand moves to his weapon as he motions for the women to stay back. False alarm, comes a voice over his radio. Kitchen staff dropped a serving tray, but the incident serves as a stark reminder of the constant danger surrounding Lucia now. She touches her belly instinctively, still amazed that something so small could carry such enormous consequences. Elena notices the gesture. How far along are you? About 10 weeks, Lucia replies. I was terrified to tell him. I thought he'd have me killed for sure. Salvatore isn't like the old stories people tell, Elena says gently. He's capable of terrible violence when necessary, but he's also capable of profound love. You've awakened something in him that's been dormant since Margaret died. That evening, as Lucia settles into her new reality, Vincent and Marco finalize their desperate plan. They've reached out to Don Riccardo Castellano, head of the rival family that's been circling Torrino territory like vultures for years. Castellano agrees to provide muscle, Vincent reports, but he wants guarantees about territorial concessions once you take control. Marco's eyes glitter with ambition and desperation. Whatever it takes, I won't let some orphan girl destroy everything my family built. At the same time, Antonio conducts his evening security sweep of the estate grounds. Years of military training have honed his instincts, and tonight something feels wrong. The shadows seem deeper, the normal sounds of the city more muted. He's circling the main house when he spots movement near the garden wall, a figure in dark clothing attempting to scale the fence. Antonio moves silently, his training taking over as he approaches the intruder. The man never sees him coming. Antonio's arm snakes around his throat, cutting off his air supply until he collapses unconscious. A quick search reveals a pistol with a silencer and a photograph of Lucia tucked into his jacket pocket. "Sir," Antonio speaks into his radio, "we have a problem." Within minutes, Salvatore arrives at the scene, his face carved from stone as he examines the would-be assassin. The man is young, probably mid-20s, with the lean build of a professional killer, but he's not family, which means someone hired outside muscle. "Wake him up," Salvatore orders. When the assassin regains consciousness, he finds himself zip-tied to a chair in the estate's basement, facing three very angry men. Salvatore sits across from him, patient as death itself. "Who sent you?" The young man tries to maintain his silence, but Antonio has creative ways of encouraging conversation. Within an hour, they have their answer. Marco and Vincent had hired him through Castellano connections. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound. Salvatore has raised Marco like his own son, groomed him for leadership, trusted him with family secrets. To learn that his nephew would try to murder his unborn child represents a level of treachery that demands blood. "What do we do with him?" Antonio asks, gesturing to the assassin. Salvatore's voice carries the cold finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. "Send him back to whoever hired him. Make sure they understand what happens to people who threaten my family." As dawn breaks over Chicago, Lucia wakes in her new bedroom to find Elena sitting beside her bed with a cup of tea and a grave expression. "There was an incident last night," Elena explains gently. "Someone tried to get to you. Antonio stopped them." Lucia's hand instinctively moves to her stomach. "Who would want to hurt me?" Elena's sigh carries decades of family disappointment. "People who think they have more right to your child's inheritance than you do." The realization hits Lucia like a physical blow. This isn't just about her anymore, or even about Salvatore's feelings. She's carrying the future of a criminal empire, and there are people within the family itself who would rather see her dead than allow an outsider's child to inherit what they consider rightfully theirs. Lucia's fingers trace the delicate chain of her mother's locket as she sits in the estate's garden, watching the sunrise paint the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and crimson. The small oval pendant contains the only photograph she has of her parents, a young couple laughing at some long-forgotten joke, their faces bright with the kind of hope that doesn't survive tragedy. Maria and Giuseppe Marcelli had died when their ancient Buick hit black ice on Interstate 94. Lucia was 16, old enough to understand loss but too young to navigate the system that would determine her future. The foster homes that followed were temporary waypoints rather than sanctuaries, places where she learned to keep her belongings in a single bag and her emotions locked away where they couldn't be used against her. "You're up early," Elena's voice breaks through her memories. Salvatore's sister approaches carrying 2 cups of coffee, her silk robe a stark contrast to Lucia's borrowed nightgown. "I couldn't sleep," Lucia admits, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Everything feels surreal. Yesterday I was serving drinks at family meetings. Today I'm supposedly carrying the future head of the Torrino family." Elena settles beside her on the marble bench, studying Lucia's profile in the morning light. "Tell me about your parents." Lucia opens the locket, showing Elena the faded photograph. They owned a small grocery store on the south side. Nothing fancy, but they knew everyone in the neighborhood. My mother would give credit to families when times were tough, and my father would stay late to help elderly customers carry their groceries. They sound like good people. They were. They believed in hard work, treating people fairly, keeping your word. Lucia's voice grows wistful. I wonder what they'd think about all this. Their daughter pregnant by a man who kills people for a living. Elena's laugh is surprisingly warm. Salvatore isn't the monster people make him out to be. Yes, he's capable of violence when necessary, but he's also the man who paid for dozens of scholarships at local schools, who made sure widows in the neighborhood had groceries during hard times, who visited Margaret's students in the hospital when they were sick. Inside the house, Salvatore sits in his study, examining intelligence reports that Antonio has compiled overnight. The attempted assassination has forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. The threat to Lucia and his unborn child comes from within his own family. Dr. Patricia Coleman arrives for Lucia's morning checkup, her medical bag and concerned expression signaling the gravity of the situation. At 62, she's been the Torrino family physician for over 2 decades, skilled in both conventional medicine and the kind of discretion that keeps dangerous men alive. "How are you feeling physically?" Dr. Coleman asks as she examines Lucia in the estate's converted medical room. "Tired, but otherwise fine," Lucia replies, though her elevated heart rate tells a different story. The doctor performs an ultrasound, her trained eyes studying the monitor with professional intensity. Suddenly she pauses, adjusting the equipment and examining the screen more carefully. "Is something wrong?" Lucia asks, fear creeping into her voice. Dr. Coleman's face breaks into a genuine smile. "Nothing's wrong, my dear, but I have some interesting news. You're carrying twins." The words hit Lucia like a thunderbolt. One child was already more responsibility than she felt prepared for. 2 seems impossible to comprehend. "Twins," she whispers, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach. When Dr. Coleman shares the news with Salvatore, his reaction surprises everyone. The man who built his reputation on stoic control actually breaks into tears, the first time Elena has seen her brother cry since Margaret's funeral. "2 grandchildren," he murmurs, his voice thick with emotion. Margaret would have been so happy, but the news of twins also doubles the stakes for everyone involved. Marco's rage intensifies when Vincent delivers the update, realizing that his claim to succession isn't threatened by one heir but by 2. "We need to act faster," Marco tells Vincent as they meet with Riccardo Castellano in a warehouse on the industrial south side. "Every day we wait, his position gets stronger." Castellano is a thin man with predatory eyes and the kind of smile that never reaches beyond his lips. "My people are in position, but I want guarantees about the Jefferson Street territory once you take control." "Done," Marco agrees, though privately he knows he's promising away family assets that have been Torrino property for 30 years. Meanwhile, Vincent has been working on a more insidious plan. He's compiled what appears to be evidence suggesting that LUCIA has been in contact with federal agents, doctored photographs, fabricated phone records, and testimony from paid witnesses who claim to have seen her meeting with FBI personnel. "This should be enough to convince your uncle that she's a threat," Vincent explains, spreading the false evidence across the warehouse table. Marco examines the documents with growing excitement. Perfect. Even if he suspects the evidence is fabricated, the seed of doubt will be planted. He can't risk keeping an informant close to the family business. Back at the estate, Lucia finds herself growing stronger despite the constant danger. Elena has been teaching her the unspoken rules of Mafia family life, how to read the subtle power dynamics in any room, which conversations to avoid, how to command respect without demanding it explicitly. The key, Elena explains as they walk through the estate's library, is understanding that power in this world isn't just about fear, it's about respect, loyalty, and the ability to make people believe that following you serves their interests better than opposing you. Lucia studies the leather-bound volumes that line the walls, everything from classical literature to detailed histories of organized crime families throughout America. "How do you know so much about this? I thought women were kept separate from the business." Elena's smile carries decades of carefully concealed frustration. "Women see everything, my dear. We're just not supposed to admit it." I've been watching family politics my entire life, learning from the sidelines while men make decisions that affect all of us. That evening, as Lucia prepares for bed, she overhears a heated phone conversation between Salvatore and someone she can't identify. His voice carries a hardness she's never heard before, promising consequences for betrayal that make her blood run cold. When he notices her standing in the doorway, his expression immediately softens. "I'm sorry you heard that," he says, hanging up the phone. "Who was it?" Salvatore hesitates, then decides on honesty. "Marco. He's angry about the succession change, and he's making threats. Nothing for you to worry about. I can handle my nephew." But Lucia sees the concern in his eyes, the way his hand unconsciously moves to the gun holstered beneath his jacket. She's beginning to understand that her pregnancy has set forces in motion that even Salvatore might not be able to control completely. As she falls asleep that night, her dreams are filled with images of her parents' grocery store, the locket's familiar weight against her chest, and the uncertain future growing within her womb. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight she allows herself to imagine a world where love conquers power, where children grow up safe, and where families protect each other instead of destroying themselves from within. The abandoned warehouse on Chicago's South Side smells of rust and broken dreams. Marco Torrino sits across from Don Riccardo Castellano at a makeshift table constructed from wooden crates, the harsh fluorescent light overhead casting deep shadows across both men's faces. Between them lies a map of the city, marked with territories that have been fought over for generations. "Your uncle's weakness creates opportunity," Castellano says, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of a predator sensing wounded prey. "But I need guarantees before I commit my people to this operation." Marco's jaw tightens as he studies the territorial demands spelled out in Castellano's proposal. Jefferson Street, the waterfront shipping contracts, 3 legitimate businesses that generate millions in clean revenue annually. The price for Castellano's support is steep. "These concessions represent 30 years of family expansion," Marco protests, though his voice lacks conviction. "And your uncle's bastard represents the end of your family's expansion entirely," Castellano counters. "Choose what matters more, pride or survival." Marco signs the agreement with hands that barely tremble, sealing a deal that will reshape Chicago's criminal landscape. The bloody handkerchief in his pocket, evidence from his interrogation of a Castellano soldier who tried to double-cross him last month, serves as a reminder that betrayal flows in all directions in this business. Across the city, Antonio Ricci coordinates surveillance from a nondescript van parked 3 blocks from the warehouse. Years of experience have taught him to recognize the subtle patterns that reveal when enemies are gathering strength. Tonight, those patterns are converging around his employer's family. Multiple vehicles arriving at the Castellano warehouse, he reports into his radio. "Looks like they're planning something significant." Through high-powered binoculars, Antonio watches Marco emerge from the building and embrace Riccardo Castellano like an old friend. The sight turns his stomach. He's known Marco since the young man was 16 years old, watched him learn the business under Salvatore's careful guidance, seen him develop into a capable leader who commanded respect throughout the organization, but ambition can poison even the strongest bonds. "Sir," Antonio speaks into his radio, "we have confirmation of the alliance. Marco and Castellano are working together." The response comes immediately, Salvatore's voice heavy with disappointment and barely controlled rage. "Bring me proof. I need evidence that even the council can't deny." While Antonio gathers intelligence, Elena sits with Lucia in the estate's library, sharing stories that illuminate the complex history of women in organized crime families. The leather-bound volumes surrounding them contain more than literature. Hidden among them are journals kept by previous generations of Torrino women, their observations and insights carefully preserved despite being officially excluded from family business. "My grandmother kept detailed records of every family meeting she overheard," Elena explains, showing Lucia a journal written in faded Italian script. She understood that knowledge was power, even when women weren't allowed to wield it openly. Lucia studies the careful handwriting, impressed by the meticulous documentation of alliances, betrayals, and power shifts spanning decades. "Why are you showing me this? Because you're going to need every advantage you can get," Elena replies seriously. "Marco isn't just fighting for succession, he's fighting to preserve a version of family tradition that excludes people like you." women, outsiders, anyone who threatens the established order. The conversation is interrupted by Salvatore's arrival, his face grim as he absorbs Antonio's intelligence report. "We have a problem," he announces, spreading photographs across the library table. The images show Marco meeting with known Castellano soldiers, exchanging documents, and clearly coordinating some kind of operation. But more disturbing are the financial records Antonio has obtained, evidence of money changing hands, weapons purchases, and safe house rentals throughout the city. "He's planning a war," Salvatore concludes, his voice hollow with betrayal. Elena examines the photographs with professional detachment. The question is whether he's planning to eliminate Lucia specifically or attempt a complete coup. Lucia feels the twins flutter in her womb as she contemplates the implications. "Maybe I should leave," she suggests quietly. "If my presence is causing this conflict, maybe it's better if I disappear." "No." Salvatore's response is immediate and absolute. "Running would only delay the inevitable. Marco has convinced himself that I've grown weak, that sentimentality has compromised my judgment. He needs to learn otherwise." That evening, Salvatore arranges a family meeting ostensibly to discuss routine business matters. The council gathers in the familiar dining room, but the atmosphere is electric with unspoken tension. Vincent takes his usual seat, his face carefully neutral as he balances loyalty to Marco against self-preservation. Marco arrives precisely on time, his demeanor confident as he greets his uncle with a respectful kiss on both cheeks, a gesture that now feels like mockery, given his secret alliance with their enemies. "Uncle," Marco says, settling into his chair, "I've been thinking about our conversation regarding family security. Perhaps we should reconsider some of our current arrangements." The words are carefully chosen, designed to sound like legitimate concerns, while actually testing whether Salvatore suspects his betrayal. It's a dangerous game that could end with bullets or reconciliation, depending on how skillfully both men navigate the conversation. Salvatore's response is measured, giving away nothing. "I'm always interested in your thoughts, Marco. Family security is certainly a priority these days." The other council members exchange glances, sensing undercurrents they can't quite identify. Tony Benedetto and Frank Caruso have served this family for decades, but neither man is prepared for the level of internal conflict that's brewing. "I think we need to be more selective about who we trust with sensitive information," Marco continues, his eyes flickering toward Vincent for support. "Recent security incidents suggest that someone close to us might be sharing details with outside parties. The implication hangs in the air like smoke from a recently fired gun." Marco is suggesting that Lucia represents a security risk, a federal informant who's infiltrated the family through Salvatore's emotional vulnerability. Vincent produces a manila folder with theatrical precision. "I've compiled some concerning evidence that the council should review," he announces, spreading fabricated documents across the table. The doctored photographs show Lucia meeting with men in suits who could plausibly be federal agents. Phone records list calls to numbers registered under obvious aliases. Witness statements claim to have seen her passing information to law enforcement personnel. Antonio, monitoring the meeting from his security station, recognizes the setup immediately. The evidence is too convenient, too perfectly aligned with Marco's interests to be authentic, but proving fabrication will require time they might not have. Salvatore examines the documents with the careful attention they deserve, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Inside, he's wrestling with the possibility that his judgment has been compromised by emotion, that his desire to protect Lucia has blinded him to legitimate security concerns. But he's also recognizing the sophisticated nature of the deception being presented to him. The evidence is compelling enough to create reasonable doubt, which serves Marco's purposes perfectly, regardless of its authenticity. "These are serious allegations," Salvatore says finally. "If true, they would require immediate action." Marco leans forward, sensing victory. "I think we need to consider whether keeping this woman close to family business serves our interests." The room falls silent as everyone awaits Salvatore's response. Outside, Chicago's night sounds filter through bulletproof windows. Traffic, sirens, the distant sounds of a city where power struggles play out in boardrooms and back alleys with equal frequency. The childhood photograph sits on Salvatore's desk like an accusation. In it, a 7-year-old Marco grins gap-toothed at the camera, while his uncle hoists him onto broad shoulders during a family picnic. The boy's eyes shine with hero worship, complete trust in the man who had promised to teach him everything about honor, loyalty, and what it meant to be a Torrino. Salvatore's weathered fingers trace the edges of the frame as he contemplates the conversation that will destroy both their lives. The fabricated evidence spread across his desk tells a story designed to turn him against Lucia, but its very existence proves Marco's betrayal more conclusively than any surveillance footage could. "Bring him in," Salvatore instructs Antonio through the intercom. When Marco enters the study, his confidence remains intact. He believes his uncle is about to make the rational choice, exile the pregnant outsider who threatens family stability. What he doesn't anticipate is Salvatore's ability to read people refined through decades of survival in a business where misreading intentions means death. "Sit down, nephew." Salvatore's voice carries none of its usual warmth. Marco takes the chair across from his uncle's desk, noting the formal distance that's replaced their usual familial closeness. "I know this situation with the girl is difficult, but you have to see reason." "Reason." Salvatore repeats the word like he's tasting something bitter. "Tell me about reason, Marco. Tell me about the reasonable choice to fabricate evidence against a pregnant woman." The color drains from Marco's face, but he recovers quickly. "I don't understand what you're accusing me of." Salvatore opens his desk drawer and removes a recording device. Antonio's voice fills the room, playing back conversations captured during Marco's meetings with Castellano operatives, discussions about falsifying documents, creating fake witness testimony, and timing the revelation for maximum impact. "Your security has been compromised," Marco says desperately. "Someone's feeding information to our enemies." "Yes," Salvatore agrees quietly. "Someone is." The silence that follows carries the weight of 30 years of shared history. Christmas mornings when Marco opened presents in this very room, graduation dinners where Salvatore beamed with pride at his nephew's accomplishments, late-night conversations about the responsibilities that came with the Torrino name. "You raised me to put family first," Marco says, his voice cracking. "Everything I've done has been to protect what we built together. You've allied yourself with the Castellanos." Salvatore's statement isn't a question. "You've promised them Torrino territory in exchange for helping you eliminate my pregnant girlfriend and unborn children." Marco's composure finally breaks. "Those bastards aren't your children. She's a nobody who seduced you when you were vulnerable. Can't you see what she's doing?" The rage that erupts from Salvatore is decades in the making, fury at being manipulated, betrayed by someone he loved like a son, forced to choose between the family he raised and the family he's creating. "Get out," he says quietly. "Uncle, please, get out." The roar echoes through the house, bringing Elena running from the kitchen where she's been comforting Lucia through another bout of morning sickness. Vincent appears in the doorway, having waited in the hallway during the confrontation. His face shows the strain of someone who realizes he's backed the wrong horse and now faces the consequences. "Don Torrino," Vincent begins, "if I could explain." "You can explain from somewhere else," Salvatore interrupts. "Both of you. You have 24 hours to disappear from my territory. After that, you'll be treated as enemies of this family." Marco rises unsteadily, the reality of his exile finally penetrating his shock. "You're destroying everything Dad built, everything you taught me to value." "I taught you to value loyalty," Salvatore replies. "Apparently you weren't listening." Elena watches from the kitchen doorway as her nephew walks out of the house, carrying only his pride and a lifetime of bitter disappointment. She's known this moment was inevitable since childhood. Marco's sense of entitlement had always been stronger than his sense of loyalty. The repercussions ripple through the organization immediately. Soldiers who had been prepared to follow Marco into battle against the Castellanos now find themselves choosing between exile and submission to a Don who's just demonstrated his willingness to sacrifice family for principle. Tony Benedetto and Frank Caruso request private meetings with Salvatore, both men struggling to understand how their careful balance of power has shifted so dramatically. Jimmy DeMarco, the eldest council member, offers his resignation rather than navigate the political complexities of the new family structure. "Half our operational commanders are asking questions," Antonio reports during an emergency security briefing. "They want to know if you're still capable of making rational decisions." Salvatore absorbs this information with characteristic stoicism. "And what do you think, Antonio? Am I still capable of rational decisions?" Antonio considers the question seriously. "I think you're making the only decision that preserves family honor. But I also think we're about to fight a war with reduced numbers against an enemy who knows all our operational procedures." Meanwhile, Lucia experiences severe cramping that sends Elena rushing to call Dr. Coleman. The stress of the family upheaval has triggered complications that could threaten the twins' survival. She needs complete bed rest, Dr. Coleman instructs, after examining Lucia. No stress, no excitement, no involvement in whatever crisis is consuming this household. But stress isn't something that can be avoided when you're carrying the future heirs of a crime family at war with itself. As Lucia lies in bed listening to the sounds of increased security activity throughout the house, she realizes that her pregnancy has become the catalyst for a conflict that will reshape Chicago's criminal landscape. Elena sits beside her bed, holding her hand as they both process the magnitude of what's happening. "I'm sorry," Elena says quietly. "None of this is your fault, but you're paying the price for decisions that were made long before you arrived. Will he be safe?" Lucia asks, knowing that Elena will understand she's asking about Salvatore. "He's survived worse," Elena replies, though her voice lacks conviction. "But this time is different. This time the threat comes from inside the family, from people who know all his weaknesses." Outside, Marco and Vincent load their belongings into a rented car, while Castellano soldiers wait to escort them to safe houses across the city. The alliance that was supposed to restore traditional family values has instead created a power vacuum that threatens to consume everyone involved. As they drive away from the estate that had been home for decades, Marco stares back at the lit windows, where his uncle continues planning for a future that doesn't include him. The childhood photograph remains on Salvatore's desk, a reminder of innocence lost and family bonds that proved weaker than ambition. The hidden safe behind Salvatore's office bookshelf hasn't been opened in 15 years. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth beneath stacks of cash and legal documents, lie the Bronze Star and Purple Heart he earned in the jungles of Vietnam. The young soldier who earned those medals learned hard lessons about strategy, sacrifice, and the kind of calculated violence necessary for survival when outnumbered and surrounded. Now, at 65, Don Salvatore Torrino unwraps those medals with hands that remember the weight of an M16 rifle and the responsibility of keeping younger men alive in hostile territory. The skills that served him in Southeast Asia seem relevant again as he faces an enemy that knows his operational procedures, his safe houses, and the loyalties of every soldier in his organization. "We're fighting a defensive war with compromised intelligence," he explains to Antonio during their dawn strategy session. Every plan Marco knows has to be assumed compromised. Every location he's visited needs to be considered exposed. Antonio spreads detailed maps across the oak table, street layouts, building blueprints, traffic patterns throughout their territory. His military experience complements Salvatore's, creating a tactical partnership that bridges generational differences in warfare. The Benedetti family has agreed to provide sanctuary if we need it, Antonio reports, but they're nervous about the implications. Supporting us against Marco means taking sides in an internal Torrino conflict. Salvatore studies the maps with the intensity he once applied to patrol routes through enemy territory. Marco's alliance with Castellano changes everything. This isn't just internal family politics anymore. It's a war for territorial control. Across the city, Elena transforms the estate's basement into an unlikely training facility. The space beneath Salvatore's elegant home, originally designed for wine storage, now contains weapons, ammunition, and tactical equipment that reflects the family's preparation for siege warfare. "I never thought I'd be teaching a pregnant woman to shoot," Elena admits as she demonstrates proper grip technique with a .38 revolver. But these aren't normal circumstances. Lucia's hands shake as she holds the weapon, the weight foreign and terrifying. 3 months ago, the most dangerous thing in her life was the possibility of losing her serving job for dropping a tray. Now she's learning to kill people who want to murder her unborn children. "I don't know if I can actually shoot someone," Lucia confesses. "You won't know until the moment comes," Elena replies practically. "But I'd rather you have the option than face a threat with nothing but hope." The training sessions become a bonding ritual between the two women. Elena shares stories about growing up in a family where women were expected to be decorative but not functional, where intelligence was appreciated privately but never acknowledged publicly. "I learned to shoot when I was 12, Elena reveals. "My father believed that Torrino women should be capable of protecting themselves, even if they were never expected to need those skills." Meanwhile, intelligence gathering reveals the scope of the threat they're facing. Marco's bitterness has metastasized into something approaching madness. He's convinced himself that eliminating Lucia and her children will restore his uncle's rational judgment and family honor. "He's telling people that you've been compromised by grief," Antonio reports after debriefing an informant. "That losing Margaret broke something in your mind that makes you vulnerable to manipulation." Salvatore absorbs this information with the detachment of someone who's learned to separate personal feelings from strategic necessity. What else? Castellano is providing more than muscle. They're offering Marco operational control of combined forces, essentially treating him as an equal partner rather than a junior ally. The implications are staggering. Marco isn't just rebelling against family authority. He's positioning himself to inherit Castellano territory alongside Torrino assets, creating a criminal empire that would dominate the entire region. He's thinking bigger than succession, Salvatore realizes. He's planning unification. That afternoon, representatives from 3 neutral families request meetings with Salvatore. The Benedettis, Marinos, and Russos have watched the Torrino civil war with growing concern, recognizing that the outcome will affect the balance of power throughout Chicago's organized crime community. "This conflict threatens everyone's stability," explains Don Joseph Benedetti during his visit to the estate. "Internal family wars have a way of spreading beyond their original boundaries." Salvatore receives these delegations in his study, projecting strength while privately calculating which alliances he can count on if the situation deteriorates further. The political chess game is as complex as the tactical preparations. Every commitment requires reciprocal concessions. Every alliance creates new vulnerabilities. "I appreciate your concern," Salvatore tells Benedetti, "but this is a Torrino family matter that will be resolved within Torrino territory." "With all due respect," Benedetti replies carefully, "your nephew's alliance with Castellano has made this everyone's concern." The conversation is interrupted by the sound of explosions in the distance, 3 simultaneous blasts that rattle windows throughout the house. Antonio's radio crackles with reports from street sentries. The family's legitimate businesses are under coordinated attack. The restaurant, the construction company, and the shipping office, Antonio reports grimly. All 3 hit within minutes of each other. Salvatore feels a familiar calm settle over him as crisis transforms from potential threat to immediate reality. The waiting phase is over. Marco has chosen open warfare over negotiation. Casualties, he asks, minor injuries, but significant property damage. This was designed to send a message rather than kill people. The message is clear. Marco and Castellano have the resources and coordination to strike multiple targets simultaneously. They're demonstrating operational capability while offering one final opportunity for Salvatore to reconsider his position. As emergency services respond to the explosions, Lucia feels the twins moving restlessly in her womb. Dr. Coleman has warned that stress could trigger premature labor, but stress isn't optional when your unborn children represent the future of a criminal empire under attack. "We need to move you to a more secure location," Elena insists, but Lucia shakes her head firmly. "I'm not running anymore," she says, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "If they want to eliminate me, they'll have to come here and face Salvatore directly." That evening, as reports filter in about the extent of the damage to family businesses, Salvatore makes a decision that will determine whether the Torrino name survives the next week. He opens his secure communications line and places calls to allies throughout the region, favors accumulated over 40 years of careful relationship building. By midnight, additional security teams from 5 different families have taken positions throughout Torrino territory. The network of mutual obligations that governs organized crime relationships has been activated in defense of an unborn child and the woman carrying his future. The obstetrics office on Michigan Avenue has been transformed into a fortress. Dr. Patricia Coleman's monthly prenatal clinic normally operates with the quiet efficiency of routine medical care, but today armored SUVs line the street, while plainclothes security personnel occupy every strategic position within a 3-block radius. Lucia sits in the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, her hands resting protectively over her expanding belly. At 5 months pregnant, the twins make their presence known with constant movement that she's learned to interpret as either contentment or distress. Today they're restless, perhaps sensing the tension that radiates from every adult around them. The sonogram appointment should take 30 minutes, Elena explains from the seat behind her. Antonio has cleared the building and positioned backup teams on every floor. The ultrasound images that Dr. Coleman produces are remarkable in their clarity. 2 distinct heartbeats fill the examination room with sound that seems impossibly loud, given the tiny size of the lives creating it. Lucia watches the monitor with wonder that temporarily displaces her fear. These are her children, real and growing, regardless of the violence swirling around their conception. Both babies appear healthy and developing normally, Dr. Coleman reports, though her voice carries professional concern. However, I'm worried about your stress levels. Sustained anxiety can affect fetal development. I'm trying to stay calm, Lucia replies, though they all know that staying calm isn't realistic when your life is under constant threat. Dr. Coleman prints several copies of the sonogram images, evidence of life that will need protection regardless of the political complications surrounding their existence. As she hands them to Lucia, neither woman notices the figure watching from the parking structure across the street. Marco Torrino lowers his binoculars and speaks into his secure phone. She's here. Both kids are healthy according to the medical appointment. The response from his Castellano contact is immediate. Execute the plan. What follows happens with the precision of a military operation. As Lucia's convoy prepares to leave the medical building, 3 vehicles converge on their location from different directions. The drivers aren't random criminals, they're experienced soldiers who understand urban warfare and have planned this operation with meticulous attention to detail. Antonio recognizes the threat pattern immediately. We're compromised, he announces through his radio. Multiple hostiles approaching from the north, east and south. Elena's training kicks in as she positions herself between Lucia and the nearest window. Stay low and follow my lead, she instructs, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The first shots shatter the medical building's windows, sending civilians scrambling for cover throughout the lobby. But this isn't a massacre, it's a precision extraction attempt designed to capture rather than kill. Marco needs Lucia alive to use as leverage against his uncle. Exit through the basement parking garage, Antonio commands as he coordinates defensive fire from his security team. Vehicle 2 will provide cover while we move to the secondary extraction point. What follows is a high-speed chase through downtown Chicago that tests every driver's skill and every passenger's courage. Lucia finds herself gripping the door handle as their SUV weaves through traffic at speeds that turn city streets into blur of motion and sound. Elena maintains constant radio contact with Salvatore, updating him on their status while coordinating with backup teams positioned throughout the city. We're heading toward the river, she reports. 2 pursuit vehicles still active. The chase culminates in a warehouse district where Antonio has prepared contingency positions. As their vehicle slides to a stop behind a concrete barrier, armed men emerge from concealed positions to provide covering fire that forces the pursuit vehicles to retreat. But the retreat isn't defeat, it's tactical withdrawal. One of the attackers has been captured during the firefight, and his interrogation reveals information that makes Lucia's blood run cold. They have detailed plans of the estate, Antonio reports after questioning the prisoner. Floor layouts, security positions, even the location of the safe room. Marco's knowledge compromises every defensive advantage we thought we had. More disturbing is the discovery of recent sonogram images in the captured soldier's possession, not the ones from today's appointment, but earlier scans that could only have come from someone with access to Dr. Coleman's files. How did they get these? Lucia asks, studying the familiar images of her children. Dr. Coleman's face goes pale as she examines the stolen sonograms. These came from my office computer. Someone hacked our medical records system. The implications extend beyond simple privacy violation. Marco's people now have detailed medical information about the twins, their size, position, estimated due date, and potential vulnerabilities. This intelligence could be used to plan more sophisticated attacks or to time operations for maximum psychological impact. "We need to assume they know everything about your medical condition," Elena tells Lucia grimly, "including the risks associated with premature labor." That evening, as they return to the heavily fortified estate, Lucia realizes that the kidnapping attempt represents a fundamental escalation in the conflict. Marco is no longer simply trying to eliminate her. He's planning to use her as a weapon against Salvatore's emotional vulnerabilities. "He knows his uncle won't risk your life or the baby's lives," Elena explains as they review the day's intelligence. "Every decision Salvatore makes now has to account for the possibility that you could be captured and used as leverage." Salvatore himself seems to age years during the crisis briefing. The man who has commanded absolute authority for decades now faces the impossible calculus of protecting his unborn heirs while maintaining the strength necessary to lead his organization. From now on, Lucia doesn't leave the estate, he decides. All medical appointments will be conducted here with Dr. Coleman making house calls. "That's not sustainable long-term," Dr. Coleman protests. "High-risk pregnancies require specialized equipment that I can't provide in a home setting." "Then we'll bring the equipment here," Salvatore replies, his tone indicating that the decision isn't negotiable. As the meeting concludes, Lucia studies the sonogram images that nearly cost her life to obtain. The two tiny figures on the grainy printout seem impossibly fragile, given the forces arrayed against them. But they're also undeniably real, human beings with their own heartbeats, their own futures, their own right to exist regardless of the political complications their existence creates. Outside her bedroom window, Chicago's skyline glitters with lights that represent millions of people going about their normal lives, unaware that the future of organized crime in their city is being determined by the survival of two unborn children and the woman carrying them toward an uncertain future. The surveillance equipment hidden throughout Castellano territory represents $50,000 worth of cutting-edge technology, miniature cameras, directional microphones, and transmitters disguised as everything from cigarette packs to loose bricks in alley walls. Elena coordinates the intelligence operation from a rented apartment 6 blocks from the Castellano compound, her laptop displaying real-time feeds from a dozen different locations. "Target acquired," whispers the voice through her earpiece as one of their operatives confirms Marco's presence at the main Castellano warehouse. Subject appears to be in heated discussion with Don Ricardo. Elena adjusts the directional microphone's frequency, filtering out ambient noise until Marco's voice becomes clear enough to understand. What she hears makes her blood run cold. "The medical records show she's carrying twins," Marco explains to assembled Castellano soldiers. "But more importantly, they show the exact positioning and development timeline. We can use this information to maximize psychological pressure." Ricardo Castellano's response reveals the sophistication of their planning. "My nephew Vincent has been analyzing your uncle's psychological profile. He believes Salvatore's attachment to the girl represents exploitable weakness rather than strength. Salvatore has always been calculating, but this pregnancy has made him emotional. He's making decisions based on protecting her rather than protecting the organization, which gives us operational advantages," Marco continues. "He's consolidated security around the estate, leaving other territories more vulnerable. We can force him to choose between protecting his legitimate businesses and protecting his pregnant girlfriend." The conversation continues for another hour, revealing details about planned attacks on Torrino shipping operations, coordination with corrupt police officials, and most disturbing of all, a timeline that suggests they're planning something major within the next 72 hours. Elena's hands shake as she documents everything, recognizing that the intelligence she's gathering could determine whether Lucia and her children survive the week. But she also realizes that her nephew's betrayal runs deeper than anyone imagined. He's not just fighting for succession anymore, he's actively working to destroy everything the Torrino family has built. Meanwhile, Antonio conducts his own investigation into Castellano financial records, following money trails that reveal the scope of their operation. Using contacts within the banking industry, he discovers that Ricardo Castellano is far more desperate than anyone realized. They're bleeding money, Antonio reports to Salvatore during their evening briefing. The Castellano organization is essentially bankrupt. This alliance with Marco represents their last chance to avoid complete collapse. The financial records paint a picture of systematic mismanagement and failed investments. Riccardo has been borrowing against future earnings for years, making promises to other crime families that his organization lacks the resources to fulfill. Supporting Marco's rebellion isn't just about gaining territory, it's about survival. Desperate men make dangerous choices, Salvatore observes, studying the documents. We need to understand exactly how desperate they are. Across the city, Lucia provides insights that surprise everyone with their psychological accuracy. Despite her lack of experience with organized crime, her observations about Marco's motivations prove remarkably perceptive. He's not just angry about losing succession, she explains during a strategy session in Salvatore's study. He's humiliated. In his mind, being displaced by an outsider's child represents the ultimate rejection of everything he believes about family hierarchy. Elena nods thoughtfully. That's why the false evidence about you being an informant was so important to him. He needed to believe that you represented a genuine threat rather than simply someone his uncle loves. Can we use that against him? Salvatore asks. Lucia considers the question seriously. Maybe, if we could make him choose between his alliance with Castellano and his claim to Torrino legitimacy, the psychological pressure might force mistakes. The conversation is interrupted by urgent radio chatter from street surveillance teams. Multiple Castellano vehicles have been spotted moving through Torrino territory, but their pattern doesn't match any previous attack strategy. They're not heading for the estate, Antonio reports, studying the movement patterns on his tactical display. They're surrounding the First National building downtown. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. First National houses the Torrino family's primary financial operations, legitimate businesses that generate millions in clean revenue annually. An attack on the bank wouldn't just be symbolic, it would threaten the economic foundation of their entire organization. How many men? Salvatore demands. At least 30 vehicles, Antonio replies. This isn't a hit-and-run operation. They're planning something major. Elena's intelligence network provides crucial details about the planned assault. They're not just hitting the bank, she reports from her surveillance post. They're targeting the safety deposit boxes where we keep emergency cash reserves and sensitive documents. The revelation transforms their understanding of Marco's strategy. He's not just trying to eliminate Lucia anymore. He's attempting to systematically dismantle the Torrino organization's ability to function. The bank assault represents economic warfare designed to force capitulation through financial pressure. We can't protect both the estate and the bank, Antonio observes grimly. We don't have enough men for a two-front defense. Salvatore studies the tactical situation with the calculating mind that has kept him alive for 4 decades. Then we don't defend, we attack. The decision to take offensive action represents a fundamental shift in strategy. Instead of waiting for Marco and Castellano to choose the time and place of confrontation, Salvatore decides to force the issue on terms more favorable to his smaller but more experienced force. Elena, how current is your intelligence about their command structure, he asks. Real time, she replies confidently. I can tell you exactly where Marco and Riccardo are at any given moment. Then we end this tonight, Salvatore decides, before they can execute their bank operation. Lucia listens to these preparations with growing understanding that the conflict has moved beyond her personal safety. The children she carries represent more than future heirs. They symbolize the continuation of a way of life that Marco believes she's corrupted. I want to help, she announces, surprising everyone in the room. Absolutely not, Salvatore replies immediately. You're staying here where you're protected. I'm not talking about physical participation, Lucia clarifies, but you need to understand Marco's psychology if you want to defeat him. He's fighting for validation as much as power. If we can force him to choose between those motivations, we might be able to turn his alliance against him. Elena recognizes the wisdom in Lucia's suggestion. She's right. Marco's relationship with Riccardo is based on mutual necessity, not trust. If we can create doubt about each other's commitment, their cooperation might collapse. As the sun sets over Chicago, 3 separate operations begin simultaneously. Elena maintains surveillance on Castellano positions, Antonio coordinates defensive preparations around critical family assets, and Salvatore prepares for the kind of decisive action that will either restore family honor or destroy everything he's spent his life building. The twins move restlessly in Lucia's womb as she settles into the secure room where she'll wait for news about whether her children will inherit an empire or become orphans before they're born. Margaret's wedding ring catches the lamplight as Salvatore places it in Lucia's palm, the white gold band still warm from his own finger, where it has rested since his wife's death. The simple circle of metal carries 43 years of shared memories. Anniversary dinners, children's graduations, quiet moments of understanding that only couples who have weathered life's storms together can appreciate. "She would have wanted you to have this," Salvatore says softly, his weathered hands closing Lucia's fingers around the precious metal. Margaret always believed that family was defined by love, not just blood. Lucia's eyes fill with tears as she studies the ring's worn surface. Tiny scratches tell stories of decades of daily wear, cooking family meals, tending garden flowers, holding grandchildren during their first steps. The weight of it feels enormous, representing not just acceptance into the Torrino family, but responsibility for continuing traditions that stretch back generations. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for what's coming," Lucia admits, her voice barely above a whisper. "Strength isn't something you have," Elena observes from across the room. "It's something you discover when circumstances demand it." The conversation is interrupted by Antonio's arrival with intelligence that changes everything. "Marco's planning to use the charity gala," he reports, his face grim with professional concern. "The annual family fundraiser is tomorrow night, and he's counting on your attendance to create a public confrontation." The Torrino family's annual charity gala represents decades of community involvement, a sophisticated event that raises money for local schools while demonstrating the family's commitment to legitimate civic engagement. Cancelling would signal weakness to both allies and enemies, but attending creates obvious security risks. "He's betting that you won't risk a public spectacle," Elena analyzes. The gala represents everything the family has built in terms of community respect and political connections. Salvatore studies photographs of the venue, the Palmer House Hotel's grand ballroom, with its crystal chandeliers and marble columns, creating an elegant backdrop for Chicago's social elite. The space offers multiple entry points, limited security options, and hundreds of potential witnesses to whatever Marco has planned. "What kind of public confrontation?" Lucia asks, though she dreads the answer. Antonio spreads blueprints across the coffee table, pointing out sightlines and potential ambush positions. Intelligence suggests he's planning to force a family meeting in front of the assembled guests. He wants to publicly challenge your legitimacy and his uncle's fitness to lead. The psychological warfare behind Marco's strategy becomes clear as they discuss the implications. By forcing a confrontation at the charity gala, he creates a situation where Salvatore must choose between maintaining family dignity and protecting Lucia from public humiliation. "If we don't attend, we look weak," Salvatore acknowledges. "If we do attend, we're walking into his trap." Lucia's response surprises everyone in the room. "Then we spring our own trap." She rises from her chair with the careful movements of someone 6 months pregnant, her hand instinctively moving to support her growing belly. The twins have been particularly active today, as if sensing the tension surrounding their mother's every decision. "What do you mean?" Elena asks. "Marco's plan depends on me being a liability," Lucia explains, her voice gaining strength as she develops her idea. "He expects me to hide behind Salvatore's protection while he makes his challenges. But what if I don't hide? What if I stand up publicly and force him to explain exactly what he's fighting for?" The audacity of the suggestion leaves the room silent. Lucia is proposing to turn Marco's psychological warfare against him by refusing to play the role of helpless victim he's assigned to her. "You want to confront him directly?" Salvatore asks, clearly torn between admiration for her courage and fear for her safety. "I want to make him explain to a room full of Chicago's elite why he thinks his own pregnant cousin deserves to die," Lucia clarifies. "Let's see how his Castellano allies feel about supporting infanticide in front of newspaper photographers." Elena's tactical mind immediately grasps the brilliance of this approach. Marco's entire justification depends on presenting you as a threat to family stability. If you appear publicly as what you actually are, a pregnant woman who loves his uncle, his narrative collapses. Antonio raises practical concerns about security, but even he recognizes the strategic value of Lucia's proposal. We can control the environment better if we're actively participating rather than just defending, he admits. That evening, as Lucia prepares for what might be the most important performance of her life, she practices the words she'll use to expose Marco's betrayal. The mirror reflects a woman transformed by circumstances, no longer the frightened server who stumbled into a crime family's politics, but someone who has learned to navigate power dynamics with increasing sophistication. Margaret's ring fits perfectly on her finger, as if the previous owner's love has somehow prepared it for this moment. Lucia touches her belly, feeling the twins respond to her movement with gentle kicks that remind her why this confrontation matters. "We're going to face this together," she whispers to her unborn children. "All of us." Elena helps her select clothing appropriate for the gala, elegant enough to command respect, but modest enough to emphasize her pregnancy rather than concealing it. The goal is to present an image that makes Marco's hostility appear monstrous rather than justified. Remember, Elena coaches as they review the evening's strategy. You're not just representing yourself tomorrow night. You're representing the future of this family and everything Salvatore has worked to build. Salvatore spends the evening reviewing security arrangements with obsessive attention to detail. Every angle, every contingency, every possible threat must be anticipated and countered. The stakes couldn't be higher. Failure means losing not just his leadership, but the lives of the woman he loves and the children who represent his legacy. As midnight approaches, Lucia lies in bed feeling the twins' restless movement that mirrors her own anxiety about tomorrow's confrontation. Margaret's ring catches moonlight from the bedroom window, its presence a reminder that she's no longer fighting this battle alone. The charity gala will determine whether the Torrino family emerges stronger from this crisis or fragments into pieces that can never be reassembled. But regardless of the outcome, Lucia has decided that she will face her enemies with dignity, courage, and the absolute conviction that love is stronger than the fear that has driven Marco to betray everything he once claimed to value. The Palmer House Hotel's grand ballroom glitters like a jeweled fortress as Chicago's social elite gather for the Torrino family's annual charity gala. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble columns, while 500 guests in formal attire create a sea of elegant conversation and restrained laughter. The heavy cream invitation that brought them here promised an evening devoted to supporting local education initiatives, but the undercurrents of tension suggest tonight will be remembered for far different reasons. Lucia descends the hotel's grand staircase with measured grace, her hand resting lightly on Salvatore's arm. Her navy blue gown has been carefully selected to accommodate her pregnancy while projecting quiet dignity, a visual reminder that she carries the future of one of Chicago's most powerful families. Margaret's wedding ring catches the light as she acknowledges greetings from guests who struggle to reconcile the young woman they see with the dramatic stories circulating through the city's underground networks. "She's beautiful," murmurs Councilwoman Patricia Hayes to her husband as the couple passes. "Hard to believe she's the center of such controversy." Elena moves through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who has attended these events her entire life, her evening gown concealing both her anxiety and the small pistol secured against her ribs. She maintains constant awareness of exit routes, security positions, and the subtle body language of guests whose loyalties remain uncertain. The Benedetti table is positioned near the east wall. She reports quietly into her concealed microphone. Don Joseph appears relaxed, but his security detail is notably larger than usual. Antonio coordinates the evening's protection from a command post established in the hotel's security office. Multiple screens display feeds from cameras positioned throughout the ballroom, while radio communications keep him connected to team members stationed at every critical location. The challenge lies in maintaining effective security while preserving the illusion of a normal social event. Subject Marco has not yet arrived, reports one of his spotters, but Castellano soldiers have been identified among the hotel staff. The discovery sends a chill through the security team. Marco and Riccardo have managed to infiltrate their people into the very foundation of the evening's operations, waiters, busboys, and maintenance workers who could strike from positions of assumed trust. Salvatore acknowledges greetings from fellow donors with the confident bearing of someone who has never allowed personal crises to affect his public persona. But Lucia notices the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes continuously scan the room for threats that could emerge from any direction. Senator Morrison is approaching from the north side. Elena's voice whispers through his earpiece. Friendly contact, but be aware that he's being watched by at least 3 different parties. The senator's conversation proves routine. Thanks for continued support. Discussion of upcoming legislation, the kind of political theater that maintains beneficial relationships between legitimate power and its shadow counterparts. But Lucia recognizes that every interaction carries additional weight tonight, that her presence beside Salvatore sends messages about family stability and future intentions. Mrs. Torrino, the senator addresses her directly, using a title that makes her heart race with its implications. I understand congratulations are in order. Thank you, Lucia replies with practiced composure. We're very excited about expanding our family. The simple exchange feels momentous given the circumstances. By acknowledging her pregnancy publicly and allowing her to be addressed as Mrs. Torrino, Salvatore is making a statement about succession that every political figure in the room will note and remember. Marco's arrival creates a subtle shift in the ballroom's atmosphere. Conversations become more guarded, laughter sounds forced, and the elegant crowd seems to sense that the evening's real purpose is about to reveal itself. He enters with a confidence that borders on arrogance, his formal attire impeccable despite the violence he's orchestrated over the past weeks. Uncle, Marco approaches with the smooth smile of someone performing for an audience. How wonderful to see you looking so well. The greeting contains just enough warmth to appear respectful while carrying undertones that make seasoned political observers lean closer to hear the exchange. Lucia feels Salvatore's arm tense beneath her hand as he responds with equal courtesy and hidden menace. Marco, I wasn't certain you'd be joining us tonight. I wouldn't miss supporting such an important cause, Marco replies, his eyes moving deliberately to Lucia's pregnant form. Education is so crucial for the next generation. Elena positions herself where she can monitor both the conversation and the movements of Castellano operatives disguised as hotel staff. 3 waiters have been identified as potential threats, their movements too coordinated to be coincidental. Antonio, she whispers into her microphone, we have multiple hostiles in position. This isn't just a confrontation, it's a coordinated operation. The realization changes everything. Marco hasn't simply come to make a public challenge. He's orchestrated a complex trap designed to eliminate Lucia and Salvatore simultaneously while creating plausible deniability among witnesses who will remember only a tragic accident during a family argument. Ladies and gentlemen, Marco's voice suddenly carries across the ballroom as he signals for attention. If I could have a moment of your time. The crowd turns expectantly, wine glasses pausing midway to lips, as Chicago's elite prepares to witness whatever drama has been building throughout the evening. Lucia feels the twins moving restlessly in her womb, as if sensing the danger surrounding their mother. I'd like to propose a toast, Marco continues, raising his champagne flute with theatrical flair, to family tradition, blood loyalty, and the sacred bonds that unite us across generations. Salvatore recognizes the setup immediately, words chosen to sound celebratory while actually challenging his recent decisions about succession and family membership. Every phrase contains coded criticism designed to resonate with guests who understand the subtext of organized crime politics. Lucia steps forward before Salvatore can respond, her movement surprising both Marco and the assembled crowd. Margaret's ring catches the light as she raises her own glass with steady hands. To love, she responds clearly, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. To the courage required to protect what matters most, and to building legacies that honor both tradition and hope for the future. The counter-toast transforms Marco's challenge into something unexpected, a pregnant woman's gentle rebuke to a man whose bitterness has consumed his judgment. The crowd murmurs appreciatively, touched by what appears to be a gracious response to family tension. Vincent Rossetti's hands shake as he writes the confession letter that will destroy his remaining credibility within organized crime circles. The hotel stationery bears the Palmer House logo, an ironic backdrop for words that will unravel decades of carefully maintained deceptions. His penmanship, usually precise from years of documenting family business, wavers with the weight of what he's revealing. "I can't do this anymore," he whispers to himself in the hotel bathroom, where he's taken refuge from the gala's festivities. Not to pregnant children, not even for Marco. The letter details everything: the fabricated evidence against Lucia, the coordination with Castellano soldiers, the systematic plan to eliminate Salvatore's heirs before they could threaten Marco's succession. Most damning of all, it reveals Marco's true intentions, not just to reclaim his position as heir, but to murder Lucia and her unborn twins, to send a message about the consequences of disrupting family hierarchy. "Dear Don Torrino," the letter begins, "I write this knowing it will likely be my death warrant, but conscience demands that I reveal the full scope of the conspiracy against your family." Vincent's crisis of conscience began 3 hours earlier, when he overheard Marco briefing Castellano soldiers about tonight's operation. The clinical way his nephew discussed killing a pregnant woman, describing it as necessary surgery to save the family's health, triggered memories of Vincent's own daughter, lost to miscarriage 20 years ago. "The plan was never just about succession," Vincent writes, his confession growing more detailed with each line. "Marco has convinced himself that your judgment has been compromised by grief and loneliness. He believes that eliminating Lucia will restore your rational decision-making abilities." In the ballroom below, Elena notices Vincent's absence from his assigned position near the Castellano delegation. Her security training immediately flags the disruption to expected patterns. In operations like tonight's, people don't simply disappear without reason. "Antonio, we're missing Vincent," she reports through her concealed microphone. "Last seen heading toward the hotel elevators 15 minutes ago." "Understood." Maintaining surveillance on primary targets, Elena's attention shifts back to the crowd, where Marco continues his performance of family reconciliation. His charm offensive has several prominent guests nodding approvingly, apparently convinced that they're witnessing a heartwarming family reunion rather than the prelude to violence. "Uncle," Marco says warmly, moving closer to where Salvatore stands with Lucia, "I hope you'll forgive the tensions of recent weeks. Family disagreements can become complicated when emotions run high." The apology sounds genuine to observers who don't understand the coded language of organized crime. But Lucia recognizes the manipulation behind Marco's words. He's positioning himself as the reasonable family member, while suggesting that Salvatore has been acting emotionally rather than strategically. "Family is complicated," Salvatore replies carefully, his tone neutral enough to avoid escalating the confrontation while refusing to accept Marco's version of recent events. Elena's earpiece crackles with urgent updates from hotel security. Multiple individuals in service uniforms have been spotted moving toward the kitchen area. This doesn't match normal staffing patterns for tonight's event. The intelligence confirms what Elena has suspected. Marco's plan extends beyond public confrontation to include coordinated violence, timed to coincide with maximum confusion. Hotel staff positions provide perfect cover for approaching targets while maintaining plausible explanations for their presence. "Lucia," Elena whispers, moving closer to provide additional protection, "we may need to move you to a secure location very quickly." But Lucia shakes her head, her expression determined despite the obvious danger. "Not yet. I need to see how this plays out." Vincent's confession reaches its most critical revelations as he documents the specific timeline for tonight's operation. The attack is scheduled for 9:47 p.m. during the charity auction, when attention will be focused on the stage. Castellano soldiers disguised as hotel staff will create a distraction while Marco's people move to secure the primary targets. He checks his watch. 9:31 p.m., 16 minutes before the violence begins. Vincent's hands steady as he reaches the letter's conclusion. "I have spent 30 years serving this family, and I cannot allow my final act to be participation in the murder of innocent children." Marco's obsession with succession has transformed him into something that would horrify the man who raised him. Whatever consequences follow this confession, they cannot be worse than living with the knowledge that I helped orchestrate infanticide. As Vincent seals the confession in a hotel envelope, the ballroom's atmosphere grows increasingly tense. Lucia notices that several waiters have positioned themselves near the exits, their movements too coordinated to be coincidental. These aren't hotel employees, they're soldiers preparing for an operation. "Salvatore," she whispers urgently, "we need to leave now." But Marco chooses that moment to escalate his public performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announces, his voice carrying across the ballroom, "I hope you'll indulge me in sharing a special family moment." The crowd turns expectantly, wine glasses reflecting crystal light as Chicago's elite prepares to witness what they assume will be a touching reconciliation. Instead, they're about to become unwilling participants in a confrontation that will determine the future of organized crime in their city. "My uncle has always taught me that family loyalty requires difficult choices," Marco continues, his words carefully chosen for their dual meaning. "Sometimes protecting the people we love means making decisions that others might not understand." Elena recognizes the setup immediately. Marco is creating justification for whatever violence he has planned, framing it as necessary protection rather than ambitious betrayal. The psychological manipulation is sophisticated, designed to confuse witnesses about who bears responsibility for the chaos about to unfold. Vincent rushes toward the ballroom, his confession clutched in sweating hands as he races to prevent the culmination of a plan he helped create. The hotel corridors blur past as he navigates toward a confrontation that will either save innocent lives or result in his own immediate death. 9:45, he gasps, checking his watch again. 2 minutes before the operation begins. In the ballroom, Lucia feels the twins moving restlessly in her womb, their agitation matching her own growing sense of imminent danger. Margaret's ring seems to pulse against her finger as she prepares for whatever revelation Marco is building toward. "The future of our family," Marco announces with theatrical emotion, "depends on our willingness to make hard choices about who deserves our protection and who represents a threat to everything we've built." The words hang in the air like a judge's sentence, and Lucia realizes that the next few minutes will determine whether her children live to see their first breath. Salvatore's father's gun weighs heavy in his hands as chaos erupts across the Palmer House ballroom. The vintage Colt .45 has been passed down through 3 generations of Torrino men, its worn grip shaped by decades of use in moments when words failed and only violence could preserve family honor. Tonight, as Marco's carefully orchestrated plan collapses into desperate improvisation, the weapon that defended the family name during Prohibition prepares to do so again. "Everyone down." Antonio's voice cuts through the screaming crowd as hotel staff reveal automatic weapons from beneath serving trays and tablecloths. The elegant charity gala transforms into a battlefield as guests in formal wear dive beneath tables while crystal champagne flutes shatter against marble floors. Marco stands in the center of the chaos, his face twisted with rage as he realizes that Vincent's last-minute betrayal has exposed the operation's timing to Salvatore's security team. The confession letter crumpled in his fist contains enough evidence to destroy any remaining credibility he might claim within the organized crime community. "You forced me to this," Marco shouts at his uncle across the ballroom, his voice barely audible above the sound of gunfire and panicked civilians. "You chose some pregnant nobody over your own blood." Lucia crouches behind an overturned banquet table, Elena's body shielding her from the violence, while trained security personnel engage the Castellano soldiers who had infiltrated the hotel staff. The twins move frantically in her womb, their distress matching her own terror as bullets shred the elegant decorations around them. "Stay down," Elena commands, her own weapon drawn as she calculates angles and distances. Antonio's team is moving to contain the situation. But containment proves impossible when Marco produces a device that makes Elena's blood freeze, a remote detonator connected to explosives that his people have planted throughout the hotel's infrastructure. The threat isn't just bullets anymore, it's the complete destruction of a building filled with 500 innocent people. "I'll bring this whole place down before I let you destroy our family's legacy." Marco screams, his thumb hovering over the detonator's trigger. Salvatore emerges from cover, his father's gun trained on the nephew he raised like a son. The distance between them, perhaps 30 feet across debris-strewn marble, might as well be a lifetime of shared memories, broken trust, and irreconcilable differences about what family actually means. "Put it down, Marco," Salvatore says quietly, his voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in command. "This isn't about family anymore. This is about your pride." "My pride." Marco's laugh contains no humor, only the bitter sound of someone who believes his entire world has been stolen from him. "You gave away my birthright to some orphan girl who spread her legs at the right time." The crude words cut through the ballroom's acoustic chaos, reaching the ears of guests who are discovering that the polite fiction of legitimate business barely conceals the brutal realities of organized crime politics. Society matrons who moments ago were discussing charity fundraising now witness the kind of naked violence that usually remains hidden from their carefully insulated world. Lucia recognizes that Marco's desperation has transformed him into something beyond reason or negotiation. The careful, strategic thinking that once made him Salvatore's chosen successor has been consumed by rage that borders on madness. In his mind, destroying everything has become preferable to allowing her children to inherit what he considers rightfully his. "You want my legacy?" Salvatore asks, taking a careful step closer. "Then act like you deserve it. Let these people go. This is between family." "Family?" Marco's voice cracks with emotion. "You threw away family the day you decided your bastards mattered more than your brother's son." The reference to Salvatore's deceased brother, Marco's father, who died in a car accident when Marco was 12, reveals the deeper psychological wounds driving tonight's violence. Marco isn't just fighting for succession, he's fighting for validation from the only father figure he's known, desperate to prove that his adoptive family bonds matter more than biological ones. Elena spots movement from the hotel's service corridors, additional Castellano soldiers attempting to flank their position while Marco holds everyone's attention with his explosive threats. Her warning to Antonio comes through hand signals that avoid compromising their tactical response. "Sir, we have multiple hostiles converging from the east and north service entrances." Antonio's voice crackles through their communication system. "Estimate 15 additional combatants." The tactical situation deteriorates rapidly as it becomes clear that Marco's operation extends far beyond the ballroom confrontation. Castellano has committed significant resources to tonight's assault, suggesting that Riccardo views this as a make-or-break operation for his financially desperate organization. Lucia feels a sharp pain in her abdomen that has nothing to do with fear. The stress of the situation is triggering contractions that could lead to premature labor. Dr. Coleman had warned that extreme stress could induce labor as early as 6 months, putting both twins at serious risk. "Elena," she gasps, "something's wrong." Elena recognizes the signs immediately. Lucia's face has gone pale, and her breathing has become shallow and rapid. The combination of terror and physical exertion is threatening the pregnancy that everyone has fought to protect. "We need to get her medical attention," Elena reports urgently. "Now." But medical attention requires movement, and movement in the current tactical environment means exposure to crossfire from multiple directions. The choice becomes impossible: risk the twins' immediate survival to preserve their long-term safety, or maintain position and hope that Lucia can endure until the situation resolves. Salvatore's awareness of his girlfriend's medical crisis adds another layer of complexity to his standoff with Marco. Every second of delay increases the risk to both Lucia and the children, but moving prematurely could trigger the explosive destruction that would kill everyone in the building. "End this, Marco," Salvatore pleads, his weapon still trained on his nephew. "Whatever grievances you have with me, these people don't deserve to die for them." Marco's response reveals the complete breakdown of his moral framework. "They chose to associate with you," he snarls. "That makes them complicit in the destruction of everything sacred about our tradition." The words confirm what Elena has suspected. Marco's rebellion has evolved beyond family politics into something approaching ideological fanaticism. In his mind, anyone who supports Salvatore's corruption of family values deserves whatever consequences follow. Vincent appears in the ballroom's main entrance, his confession letter held high as evidence of his change in loyalty. "Marco, stop," he shouts across the chaos. "This isn't what your father would have wanted." The reference to Marco's biological father creates a moment of hesitation that Salvatore recognizes as his only opportunity for decisive action. The vintage Colt in his hands represents more than family history. It represents the willingness to do whatever becomes necessary to protect the people who matter most. The shot that follows echoes through the Palmer House ballroom like thunder, its sound mixing with screams, breaking glass, and the final collapse of relationships that had once defined the meaning of family loyalty. The simple plastic hospital bracelet around Lucia's wrist reads, "High-risk pregnancy, bed rest required," in black letters that seem inadequate to capture the complexity of her situation. She lies in the private medical suite of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, surrounded by monitors that track both her vital signs and those of the twins who nearly arrived 6 weeks too early in the Palmer House ballroom. Dr. Patricia Coleman adjusts the IV drip that's delivering medications to prevent further contractions, her professional demeanor masking deep concern about the long-term effects of the trauma Lucia has endured. The stress-induced labor has stopped for now, she explains to Salvatore, who sits beside the hospital bed with his arm in a sling from the bullet wound he sustained, protecting Lucia during the firefight. "But we need to monitor closely for the next 72 hours. Elijah paces the hospital room's perimeter with the restless energy of someone accustomed to action who's been forced into a waiting role. The charity gala's aftermath has left her coordinating family business operations while managing the political complexities of Marco's death and the collapse of the Castellano organization. Vincent's confession has been authenticated by 3 independent experts, she reports during their morning briefing. The federal prosecutors are satisfied that Marco acted alone in his rebellion, which means no additional indictments against family leadership. Salvatore nods wearily, the weight of recent events etched deeply in the lines around his eyes. The nephew he raised from childhood is dead by his own hand, killed in a moment when protecting Lucia and her children required the ultimate sacrifice of family bonds. "How are the other families responding?" he asks. Respectfully, Elena replies, "Don Benedetti has publicly acknowledged your handling of the situation as necessary to preserve family honor. The general consensus is that Marco's alliance with Castellano represented betrayal that justified extreme response. The political ramifications extend far beyond family boundaries. Marco's death and the simultaneous destruction of Ricardo Castellano's organization has eliminated 2 major players from Chicago's organized crime landscape, creating opportunities for territorial realignment that will shape illegal activities for years to come." Antonio enters with intelligence reports that paint a picture of systematic change throughout the region. "Castellano's financial collapse has accelerated since Ricardo's death," he reports. "Their legitimate businesses are being sold to cover debts, and their street operations have essentially ceased to exist." The conversation is interrupted by movement from Lucia's hospital bed. She's been drifting in and out of consciousness since the medication began, but now her eyes open with the clarity of someone fully aware of her surroundings. "The babies?" she asks immediately, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. "Safe," Dr. Coleman assures her, checking the fetal monitors that display 2 strong, steady heartbeats. "Both children are showing normal vital signs, though we want to keep you under observation to prevent any recurring complications." Lucia's relief is visible as she processes the information. The twins she's carried through months of violence and uncertainty have survived their most dangerous night, though the memory of gunfire and chaos still haunts her dreams. "Vincent came to see you this morning," Elena informs her gently. "He wanted to apologize for his role in Marco's conspiracy and to pledge his renewed loyalty to the family." The redemption of Vincent Rossetti represents one of the few positive outcomes from the Palmer House confrontation. His last-minute decision to betray Marco's operation saved dozens of lives and provided crucial evidence for law enforcement's investigation into the violence. "He's asked to resume his position on the council," Salvatore explains, "though that decision ultimately rests with you." Lucia studies his face, recognizing that he's asking for her input on family leadership decisions in a way that acknowledges her new status as equal partner rather than protected dependent. The transition from outsider to family matriarch has been accelerated by circumstances that forced her to prove her strength under the most extreme pressure. "Vincent earned his redemption," she says finally. "People should have the opportunity to correct their mistakes when they demonstrate genuine remorse." The magnanimous response reflects the measured wisdom that Lucia has developed through trauma. Her ability to forgive without forgetting, to show mercy while maintaining strength, represents exactly the kind of leadership that the family needs as it rebuilds from the devastation of internal conflict. Dr. Coleman's examination reveals that both twins have continued developing normally despite their mother's recent trauma. They're resilient, she observes with professional admiration. Sometimes children in high-stress environments develop enhanced survival capabilities that serve them well throughout life. That afternoon, as Lucia rests under medical supervision, Salvatore meets with representatives from Chicago's remaining organized crime families. The gathering takes place in the hospital's private conference room, where bulletproof glass and discreet security arrangements allow for sensitive discussions without compromising Lucia's medical care. The Torrino family appreciates your support during recent difficulties. Salvatore addresses the assembled leadership. Moving forward, we're committed to maintaining the stability that benefits all our operations. Don Joseph Benedetti speaks for the group when he responds. Your handling of internal betrayal has reinforced confidence in Torrino leadership. The families look forward to continued cooperation under your guidance. The diplomatic language conceals complex negotiations about territorial boundaries, business partnerships, and mutual security arrangements that will govern relationships between organizations for the foreseeable future. Marco's death has actually strengthened Salvatore's position by demonstrating his willingness to enforce family discipline, regardless of personal cost. Elena coordinates these discussions while simultaneously managing the practical details of family business operations. The legitimate enterprises that generate millions in clean revenue have continued functioning throughout the crisis, testament to the organizational strength that extends beyond any individual leader. As evening approaches, Lucia wakes to find the hospital room filled with flowers from well-wishers throughout Chicago's political and business communities. The charitable gala that ended in violence has ironically strengthened her public profile as someone who survived tragedy with grace and dignity. The mayor's office sent those, Elena explains, pointing to an elaborate arrangement of white roses, along with a note expressing relief at your recovery and continued support for family community involvement. The political rehabilitation represents a crucial element of rebuilding family influence. Public sympathy for a pregnant woman who survived an assassination attempt has actually enhanced the Torrino family's legitimate social standing, creating opportunities for expanded civic engagement. When can I go home? Lucia asks, her voice growing stronger with each hour of recovery. Soon, Dr. Coleman promises, but home will include modified activities and constant medical monitoring until these babies decide they're ready to meet the world. The peace treaty document spread across Salvatore's desk represents more than territorial agreements. It establishes a new paradigm for organized crime leadership that acknowledges Lucia's children as legitimate heirs despite their unconventional parentage. The formal language crafted by lawyers from 5 different crime families creates legal framework for succession that will protect the twins' inheritance rights well into adulthood. Article 7 specifically addresses gender equality in leadership succession, Elena explains as she reviews the treaty's terms with representatives from Chicago's remaining organized crime families. Future family leadership will be determined by capability and loyalty rather than traditional male preference. Don Joseph Benedetti examines the document with the careful attention of someone who understands that these agreements will shape criminal enterprise structure for decades. This represents significant departure from historical precedent, he observes. Are all parties comfortable with such progressive language? The Torrino family's recent experiences demonstrate that traditional structures can be exploited by ambitious individuals who prioritize personal advancement over organizational stability. Salvatore responds diplomatically. These modifications strengthen family unity by clarifying succession criteria. Lucia sits at the conference table despite Dr. Coleman's protests about bed rest, her presence essential for legitimizing the agreements being negotiated on behalf of her unborn children. 7 months pregnant now, she commands respect through demonstrated courage rather than inherited authority. The financial provisions ensure educational trusts for both children, she adds, her voice carrying the measured confidence of someone who has learned to navigate complex political negotiations. Regardless of their ultimate career choices, they'll have resources to build meaningful lives. The conversation reflects broader changes in organized crime family structure that extend far beyond the Torrino organization. Marco's rebellion and subsequent death have forced traditional leaders to reconsider assumptions about loyalty, succession, and the role of women in family business operations. Antonio coordinates security for the historic meeting while simultaneously managing intelligence networks that monitor potential threats to the new power structure. Surveillance indicates general acceptance of the treaty terms among street-level soldiers, he reports during a break in negotiations. The elimination of Castellano leadership has created territorial opportunities that benefit everyone involved. The territorial redistribution has proven surprisingly smooth, given the violence that preceded it. Castellano assets have been divided among the remaining families according to their contributions to the conflict's resolution, creating economic incentives for continued cooperation rather than renewed competition. Vincent Rossetti's rehabilitation continues as he demonstrates genuine commitment to family loyalty through actions rather than words. His detailed knowledge of Castellano operations has proven invaluable for identifying security vulnerabilities and opportunities for legitimate business expansion. The shipping contracts formerly held by Castellano interests represent significant revenue potential, Vincent reports to the assembled leadership. With proper legal restructuring, these assets could generate substantial clean income for participating families. Elena's role as official family counselor has evolved into something approaching diplomatic immunity within the organized crime community. Other families now seek her mediation for internal disputes, recognizing her ability to balance traditional values with progressive problem-solving approaches. The Torrino model of inclusive leadership has created stability that benefits everyone's operations, she explains to Lucia during a private moment between negotiations. Your courage in confronting Marco publicly changed how these men think about family loyalty and female leadership. The afternoon session focuses on educational opportunities for the next generation of family members. Lucia's insistence that her children receive legitimate career options has inspired similar conversations among other families about preparing their heirs for success in both legal and illegal enterprises. Traditional apprenticeship programs will continue, Don Benedetti acknowledges, but we're also establishing scholarship funds for university education in business, law, and other professional fields that serve organizational interests. The integration of legitimate education with family business training represents a significant evolution in organized crime culture. Rather than viewing legal careers as betrayal of family tradition, the treaty establishes professional achievement as another form of family service. Dr. Coleman's afternoon examination reveals that both twins are developing ahead of schedule, their accelerated growth perhaps influenced by the high-stress environment of their mother's pregnancy. They're remarkably active, she observes while conducting the ultrasound, and their positioning suggests they're preparing for birth within the next few weeks. The impending arrival adds urgency to the treaty negotiations, as formal agreements must be finalized before the children's birth creates additional legal complexities. Their legitimacy within family hierarchy needs official documentation that will withstand future challenges. The naming ceremony will follow traditional protocols, Salvatore explains to the assembled representatives. All participating families will witness the formal recognition of these children as Torrino heirs. That evening, as the treaty negotiations conclude with unanimous approval, Lucia experiences the first strong contractions that suggest labor might begin sooner than expected. The irony isn't lost on anyone present. The children whose inheritance rights they've spent the day formalizing appear eager to claim their birthrights ahead of schedule. Dr. Coleman is en route, Elena reports as she helps Lucia manage the increasing discomfort. But we may need to transport to the hospital if the contractions continue intensifying. The prospect of premature birth during treaty negotiations creates logistical challenges that require careful coordination between medical needs and security requirements. The children who have survived assassination attempts while still in the womb deserve protection that extends seamlessly into their first moments of independent life. Whatever happens, Lucia says between contractions, these babies are going to be born into a world where they're already recognized as family leaders. That's more than I ever dared hope for when I first told you I was pregnant. Salvatore's response carries decades of accumulated wisdom about the responsibilities that accompany inherited power. They'll also be born into a world where they're expected to earn the respect that their bloodline provides. Legacy creates opportunity, but character determines whether that opportunity becomes meaningful achievement. The twin baby blankets lie carefully folded in the estate's nursery, their soft blue and pink wool hand-knitted by Elena during the long months of waiting and uncertainty. Each stitch represents hours of meditation on the future she hopes to help create, a world where these children can grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally, regardless of the violent circumstances surrounding their conception. I started these the night after Marco's exile, Elena explains to Lucia, as they make final preparations for the baby's arrival. Somehow keeping my hands busy helped me believe that everything would work out. The nursery itself reflects careful attention to both security and comfort. Bulletproof glass windows provide protection without sacrificing natural light, while state-of-the-art monitoring equipment ensures that any threat to the children will be detected immediately. Yet despite these precautions, the room maintains the warm intimacy appropriate for newborns who deserve normal childhoods. Lucia's contractions have been intensifying throughout the afternoon, though Dr. Coleman insists they still have several hours before active labor begins. First babies typically take their time, she observes while checking Lucia's vital signs, but twins often have their own schedule. At 37 weeks, the pregnancy has reached the threshold where early delivery poses minimal risks to the children's health. The stress-induced complications from the Palmer House incident have actually accelerated fetal development in ways that make early birth less concerning than it might have been under normal circumstances. Your blood pressure is elevated, but stable, Dr. Coleman reports, and both heartbeats remain strong and regular. We're ready for delivery whenever these babies decide they're finished cooking. Salvatore paces the estate's halls with the nervous energy of an expectant father, his usual composure challenged by circumstances beyond his control. At 65, he's about to become a father again after decades of believing that chapter of his life had ended with Margaret's death. The security teams are positioned, Antonio reports during his hourly briefing. Hospital route has been cleared and backup medical facilities identified in case we need alternative options. The elaborate precautions reflect lessons learned from recent violence, but they also acknowledge that the children's birth will mark a symbolic victory over the forces that sought to prevent their existence. Every safe moment of their delivery represents triumph over Marco's destructive vision of family purity. Elena's role has evolved into something approaching midwifery as she coordinates between medical, security, and family needs. Her own experience with pregnancy loss years earlier has given her deep appreciation for the miracle of successful childbirth, especially under such challenging circumstances. Remember your breathing techniques, she coaches Lucia through a particularly strong contraction. You've survived assassination attempts and family wars. Labor is just another challenge to overcome. The comparison draws a weak smile from Lucia, despite her discomfort. At least this challenge ends with something wonderful, instead of someone trying to kill me. Vincent arrives with intelligence reports that confirm the continued stability of territorial agreements negotiated in the peace treaty. All families are maintaining their commitments, he reports to Salvatore. No indication of anyone planning to exploit the transition period for territorial advantage. The political stability surrounding the children's birth represents a remarkable achievement given the violence that characterized recent months. The organized crime community has essentially agreed to a ceasefire in honor of new life, treating the twins' arrival as an event that transcends traditional rivalries. Dr. Coleman, we need to move to the hospital, Elena announces as Lucia's contractions reach the frequency that indicates active labor has begun. The babies are coming, whether we're ready or not. The convoy that transports them to Northwestern Memorial Hospital includes armored vehicles, motorcycle escorts, and coordinated air support from allies who have committed resources to protecting the new heirs. The birth of these children has become a community event that extends far beyond immediate family interests. The delivery room has been transformed into a secure medical facility where Lucia can give birth surrounded by both advanced medical equipment and discreet security personnel. Dr. Coleman's team includes specialists in high-risk pregnancy who have been briefed on both medical requirements and safety protocols. First baby is crowning, Dr. Coleman announces, as Lucia pushes through contractions that seem to channel months of accumulated stress and determination. One more push should do it. The cry that fills the delivery room carries all the power of new life triumphing over forces that sought to prevent its existence. Salvatore Torrino Jr. enters the world with the robust voice of someone destined for leadership, his arrival marking the successful continuation of family legacy through love rather than violence. "He's perfect," Lucia gasps through tears of exhaustion and joy. "Absolutely perfect." 3 minutes later, Margaret Lucia Torrino follows her brother into the world with equal determination, her birth completing the transformation that began with a terrified confession in a dining room filled with dangerous men. Elena cradles the children while medical staff tends to Lucia's recovery, her own eyes bright with tears at witnessing the miracle they've all fought to protect. "They're beautiful," she whispers. "Your parents would be so proud." Salvatore holds his son with hands that have dealt death, but now tremble with the responsibility of nurturing new life. The baby's eyes open briefly, revealing the dark intensity that has characterized Torrino men for generations, but softened by something that might be his mother's gentle wisdom. "Welcome to the family," he murmurs to both children. "You're going to change everything." 6 months have transformed the Torrino estate into something unprecedented in organized crime history. A functioning family compound, where children's laughter mingles with business discussions, where baby monitors share shelf space with secure communication equipment, and where the future of Chicago's underworld literally takes its first steps across marble floors once stained with blood. Lucia moves through the morning routine with the confident grace of someone who has grown into authority through trial by fire. The Children's Trust Fund documents spread across the dining room table represent more than financial planning. They establish legal framework for leadership succession that acknowledges both traditional values and progressive change. The educational provisions ensure access to the finest schools, regardless of family business complications, she explains to the assembled lawyers who have spent months crafting documents that will protect her children's futures. But they also maintain flexibility for whatever career paths Salvatore and Margaret choose for themselves. Elena watches from the doorway as her 6-month-old niece attempts to crawl toward a sunbeam streaming through bulletproof windows. Margaret's determined persistence in reaching her goal reflects the stubborn courage that has become a family trademark, while her brother observes the effort with the calculating attention of someone already learning to assess situations before acting. "She's going to be trouble," Elena observes with obvious affection. "Smart, determined, and completely fearless, just like her mother." The children's development has exceeded every expectation despite the traumatic circumstances surrounding their conception and birth. Both babies demonstrate advanced motor skills and social awareness that suggest they've inherited intelligence from both parents, along with the resilience that comes from surviving extraordinary challenges. Antonio coordinates security operations from the estate's modernized command center, where traditional surveillance equipment shares space with baby monitors that allow him to maintain constant awareness of the children's safety. Perimeter sensors show normal patterns, he reports during the morning briefing. No unusual activity in the past 24 hours. The security arrangements have evolved to accommodate the reality of protecting mobile children rather than stationary adults. Baby-proofed safe rooms, reinforced nursery windows, and discreet bodyguards trained in pediatric protection represent innovations in criminal enterprise security that other families have begun requesting for their own operations. Vincent's complete rehabilitation has made him invaluable for managing the legitimate business operations that generate increasingly important revenue streams. The construction contracts are performing ahead of projections, he reports to Salvatore during their weekly review. Clean income now represents 60% of total family revenue. The shift toward legitimate enterprise reflects broader changes in organized crime strategy that prioritize sustainable growth over high-risk illegal activities. The twins' inheritance will include substantially more legal assets than any previous generation of Torrino heirs, providing them with options that extend far beyond traditional criminal enterprises. Margaret would be amazed by how much has changed, Salvatore observes, as he watches his son attempt to stack building blocks with methodical precision. The family she knew was built on fear and secrecy. This version is built on love and strategic adaptation. The comparison to his late wife comes naturally now, without the overwhelming grief that once made her memory too painful to discuss. Lucia's presence hasn't replaced Margaret's importance. Instead, it's created space for honoring the past while building something entirely new. Dr. Coleman's monthly examinations confirm that both children continue developing normally despite their extraordinary circumstances. Their cognitive development is actually advanced for their age, she reports after completing comprehensive assessments, probably due to the enriched environment and constant intellectual stimulation. The stimulation comes from an unusual combination of sources: classical music playing during family business meetings, multiple languages spoken by household staff, and the kind of strategic thinking discussions that most children don't encounter until much later in life. Elena's own transformation has been equally remarkable. Her engagement to Vincent represents the successful navigation of complex family politics, while her role as official counselor has expanded to include mediation services for other crime families dealing with succession disputes. The Romano family has requested our assistance with their internal leadership transition, she reports to Lucia during their afternoon planning session. They want to implement some version of our inclusive succession model. The request represents recognition that the Torrino approach to family governance has created stability and prosperity that traditional authoritarian structures couldn't achieve. Other organizations now seek to emulate innovations that grew from necessity during their recent crisis. Lucia's third pregnancy announcement comes during a family dinner that includes representatives from allied families, a gathering that demonstrates how thoroughly integrated she's become into the organizational leadership structure. The news is met with congratulations that reflect genuine celebration rather than political calculation. Another addition to the next generation, Don Benedetti observes with obvious pleasure. The Torrino family's future appears very secure indeed. The evening concludes with the kind of domestic scene that would have been impossible to imagine 18 months earlier. Salvatore reading bedtime stories to his children, while Lucia plans charitable foundation activities that will give the family legitimate community influence, and Elena coordinates with Vincent on business operations that blend traditional loyalty with progressive management practices. They're going to grow up thinking this is normal, Lucia observes as she watches the children settle into sleep. A world where family means protection and love, rather than fear and obligation. Maybe that's exactly what normal should look like, Salvatore replies, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who has discovered that adaptation can strengthen traditions rather than destroying them. Outside their bedroom windows, Chicago's skyline glitters with lights that represent millions of people whose lives have been subtly improved by the stability that the Torrino family's transformation has brought to organized crime operations. The children sleeping peacefully in their cribs represent hope for a future where power serves love, rather than the other way around. The updated family portrait hangs in the estate's main hallway, its gilded frame containing 5 generations of Torrino heritage that spans from Sicily's olive groves to Chicago's modern skyline. In the center, 2-year-old Salvatore Jr. and Margaret sit on their parents' laps, while Salvatore Sr. holds baby Antonio Vincent Torrino, named for the man who saved their lives and the one who found redemption through loyalty. "Nonno, tell story," Margaret demands in the mixture of English and Italian that has become the household's natural language. At 2 years old, she commands attention with the imperious confidence of someone born to leadership, her dark eyes reflecting intelligence that seems to absorb everything around her. Salvatore adjusts his granddaughter on his lap, his weathered hands gentle despite their violent history. At 67, he has lived to see the family legacy secured through love rather than fear, an outcome he never dared imagine during the dark months when Marco's rebellion threatened everything he valued. Once upon a time, he begins, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who understands that stories shape reality. There was a brave young woman who changed an entire family by choosing courage over safety. Lucia looks up from where she's nursing Antonio. her smile reflecting 4 years of transformation from frightened outsider to confident matriarch. The journey from that terrifying confession in the dining room to this peaceful family moment seems impossible in retrospect, yet each challenge overcome has strengthened rather than diminished her capacity for leadership. Elena enters with wedding planning documents that reflect her upcoming marriage to Vincent, a union that represents the complete healing of family divisions that once seemed irreparable. The Benedetti family has offered their estate for the ceremony, she reports. Don Joseph says it would honor him to host a celebration of Torrino family unity. The wedding will serve multiple purposes beyond romantic fulfillment. It will demonstrate publicly that the family rewards loyalty and forgiveness, while also strengthening political alliances that ensure continued stability throughout Chicago's organized crime community. Antonio coordinates security from his position as underboss, a role that combines traditional enforcement responsibilities with innovative approaches to conflict resolution. The quarterly reports show continued decrease in territorial disputes. He briefs Salvatore during their afternoon meeting. The model we've established has reduced violence by 60% across all participating families. The statistical success reflects more than effective management. It represents fundamental change in how organized crime families approach internal and external relationships. The Torrino approach of inclusive leadership and diplomatic problem-solving has created prosperity that benefits everyone involved. Vincent's transformation from conspirator to trusted advisor illustrates the family's capacity for redemption without compromising security. The legitimate business operations are expanding into construction management and financial consulting, he reports with the enthusiasm of someone who has discovered meaningful work. Clean revenue should exceed 80% of total income within 5 years. The shift toward legitimate enterprise ensures that the children will inherit options their predecessors never possessed. They can choose to participate in traditional family business or pursue entirely different careers while maintaining family connections and security. Dr. Coleman's final examination before retiring confirms that all 3 children are developing normally despite their extraordinary circumstances. They're remarkable, she observes while watching Margaret attempt to organize her toys with systematic precision. Intelligent, confident, and completely secure in their family relationships. The security comes from knowing they're unconditionally loved rather than valued primarily for their potential contributions to family power. This psychological foundation provides stability that allows them to develop authentic personalities rather than adopting roles determined by organizational necessity. Mama Strong, Salvatore Jr. announces during dinner, his 2-year-old vocabulary already capturing concepts that many adults struggle to understand. Family strong, the simple observation reflects wisdom that transcends his young age. The strength he recognizes isn't physical power or financial resources, it's the emotional resilience that comes from relationships built on mutual support rather than fear-based hierarchy. Lucia's evening routine includes reading business reports while rocking Antonio to sleep, her ability to multitask reflecting the complex demands of modern family leadership. The quarterly financial statements show continued growth across all enterprises, but more importantly, they demonstrate sustainable success that doesn't depend on illegal activities. The scholarship program has received applications from 43 families. She reports to Salvatore as they review philanthropic activities. We're creating opportunities for the next generation that extend far beyond our immediate organization. The charitable work serves strategic purposes while also fulfilling genuine desires to improve community conditions. Children who benefit from Torrino-funded education often develop loyalty that proves more valuable than traditional enforcement relationships. As bedtime approaches, the children gather around their grandfather for the family story that has become nightly tradition. Tonight's version focuses on the importance of choosing love over fear, courage over safety, and family unity over individual ambition. The brave young woman learned that real strength comes from protecting people who can't protect themselves, Salvatore concludes, his eyes meeting Lucia's across the room. And the family she joined became stronger because they learned that love creates more loyalty than fear ever could. Margaret claps enthusiastically while her brother nods with serious understanding that suggests he's already processing the moral implications of the story. Antonio sleeps peacefully in his mother's arms, dreaming dreams that will be shaped by the legacy of transformation rather than tradition. Outside, Chicago's lights twinkle with the promise of opportunities that extend far beyond the criminal enterprises that once defined family possibilities. The children growing up in this house will inherit power, but more importantly, they'll inherit the wisdom to use that power for creation rather than destruction. Tell again tomorrow, Nonno, Margaret requests as Elena carries her toward the nursery. Every night, Salvatore promises, until you're old enough to tell the story to your own children. The cycle continues, but transformed, carrying forward the best of family tradition while discarding the elements that created unnecessary suffering. Love has conquered fear, and the future stretches ahead with infinite possibility.